Hello everyone, this little weirdo is the DragonFly Y4. Featuring awesome branded 1105 7000 kV motors, Racer Star 2.4 inch props, F3 flight controller with an OSD, 10 amp 4-in-1 ESC, a 600 TV line CCD camera, it's not a run cam, 25 milliwatt 48 channel VTX, JST for your battery connection. It weighs 62.93 grams. Bottom plate measures 1.94 millimeters, top plate measures 1.98 millimeters, side plates are 1.94 millimeters. I'm getting 100 millimeters motor to motor. Comes with a rubber band, an extra set of props and screws, and the wiring connector for your receiver. Couple of things that didn't fit neatly into that quick roll. You can see the flight controller has got an integrated VTX, and they put a giant blob of whatever this white bird poop stuff looking is. And the lead for our antenna is actually quite short, so that makes our reception maybe not so good because we really can't get any lean back with the linear, it would be ideal if we were flying at this angle for that to be kind of straight up or somewhere straight up versus being laid over like that. And you're going to get some blockage just because, you know, the motors might get in the way, and that prevents RF being as clean as possible. But something to take in consideration. Also note that this is not a standard mounting pattern. This one is like 25 by 30 or something like that. It's kind of rectangle shaped. So if you need to replace these, you're going to have to get this kind, or you're going to have to drill out the bottom plate and to be able to mount anything else. I just noticed this, they have other holes, but those aren't standard sized either. Weird. Okay, so be careful if you need replacement parts. Make sure you can find those if you decide to pick up something like this, because if you do need replacement parts, they are going to need to be proprietary. Again, we shouldn't mistake this camera for a run cam. While the image is better than a CMOS camera that we used to fly all the time, it's still not run cam or predator worthy yet. I do like the camera mount though. Outside of being able to see a little bit of the carbon in view, if they'd have just done one simple thing with this camera mount, if they'd have just put a little area where we could slide this forward and back, you know, so it comes along here. If they'd have just had a little L or a reverse L coming back here, we could slide the camera back. And so we could manipulate that more and maybe keep the camera protected while also keeping the carbon out of view. But they didn't do that here. But if you're a frame designer, I think this is fairly ingenious. It's fairly light, I would think, outside of the metal screws that you need, but that has to do with the overall structure. But a little bit of an L right here gives us the ability to move that back. We don't have a lot of room in our stack, though. If you can see with these connectors, I can't tilt it much further back or I'm going to be touching, and I do avoid those pieces touching, because if they do, then you have extra vibration, resonance that might be going on, make tuning harder. And speaking of tunes, I've never flown a Y4 like this. I've never flown a tricopter, anything like that. And that was one of the things that kind of interested me. But tuning this was kind of weird. I kind of felt like I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I don't know how many vehicles I've tuned, but this one, it just didn't follow convention. So I have never seen a vehicle with the eye so high, but that's what it needed to fly like in the video you see. The D value is also a little bit high. I like to fly with a lower D for the most part, but I had to pump those up to make things work the way I wanted to. It may vary. Usually my PY value, my proportional for Y, or yaw, is normally quite a bit higher than that 55 that you see on screen. Normally I'm running in the 80s, so that was, you know, it was just a bit weird, and so it took me more time, took me more packs to kind of get the tune. I'm not going to say it's locked in by any stretch. I didn't get to where you turn it to PT1 in the filters and turn off any of the notch filters, anything like that. This is just a basic tune for flying fun. I do think these are the same components that we saw in the QAV 105, and I had problems with it, with that one, with my flight times getting shorter to where eventually they were below 1 minute. I never solved that, but I was a little bit worried we were going to have the same issue here. So I kept putting more batteries through this thing, even though I was pretty happy with the amount of flights I had. I was just curious if that problem would repeat itself, and in my flight experience, that problem did not come back up. So maybe on the QAV 105, I just had something that was faulty. I can't explain it because I never got around to fixing it, mainly because I don't have a bunch of proprietary parts like this laying around that I could swap out to see if I could figure out if it was a hardware issue. As far as my flight experience goes, it was pretty fun, and I was a little bit surprised that, you know, it's very low weight, and I think that's one thing it's got going for it. I only had, you know, the one severe crash I had, I kind of showed you where I tried to go from the chimney side to the garage side of the house, and I got hung up in some scraggle because I didn't correct enough while I was in the air, and then it just kind of tumbled to the ground. That wasn't a real severe crash, and all ended up happening was I ended up cracking a prop, which these props tend to do. They tend to either snap or get stressed. Here you can see it right here, hopefully, right there. And I have in the iFlight iStretch 2 or something like that, the IX2 from iFlight, I ended up blowing off a blade in air. So you have to be careful with these because they may seem fine. You may be able to bend it back and they seem fine as far as their structural integrity. And then you hit the throttle real hard, it just blows off one of the props. And then if you've got it tuned real tightly and you've got the filters turned off and you've got the deep filter turned off, you may end up running into troubles if that happens to you. And these props, they're really our only option, and that is fairly unfortunate. If they'd have just made it a touch bigger in a couple little areas, you can't run 2.5-inch props. It's going to hit. I tried. We have minimal clearance, but if they'd have just made it, maybe if they'd have made it the 110, which I'm not sure how you measure a Y, but that's what I got. You know, you saw what I got. If they'd have just made it maybe a 110, then we could have gotten 2.5-inch props on there. Then we'd had a whole different world of prop availability to us. But in this configuration with what we have, I believe that these are the only props we're going to be able to run. The props stick on fine. I didn't have any problems in flight. They press on real nice and tight. I do think if you have to take this prop off, it's going to be a pain in the tuchus. You can get some flex here. You can see how that's touching, but I didn't experience anything with flight. But to get that prop off, you're pretty much going to have a prop remover and go underneath and lift that up to where you can get it out with your fingers, because there just isn't much room above the motor stem and this top motor. So it's something to think about. I thought it flew well. I was pretty happy with it. It's kind of fun. I don't think for $160, which I think is the current pricing as of tonight, I would buy one. It was kind of fun for me to experiment with it. I think if the price came way down, maybe if it came down to $100, it might be worth it to some of you to just have a little bit of a different flight experience. Once I got it tuned, it flew very, very similar to a traditional quadcopter, but it was just a little bit different. It's hard to put into words how it felt. You had to kind of get used to it. I'll take a few packs just to kind of warm up before I start flying for recording purposes, so to speak. And in this case, it took more than just a few. Thankfully, I had plenty of batteries to work with. I didn't fly the China Hobby Line batteries just yet. I don't have too many. Those should be coming soon. You know, they had a giant sale and stock was real low or out in just about all their warehouses. So maybe in the next month we'll see some more of those batteries, and I'll be able to put some more packs through more machines and get a better read on them and start to work on that stuff. But as far as this machine goes, you know, it was fun. But again, I'm not certain it's worth it. I'm sure some people will say, oh no, a JST. And yeah, it's got a JST. And if you're using those G&B batteries that we oftentimes fly on 3S 450 or 550s, it's got a JST already on them, unless you buy them from, I think, Race Day Quads. There's, you know, obviously they're not G&B labeled. They have their own label on there, but I'm pretty certain they're the same batteries. They perform the same. They're the same weight and size. They just don't have the JST on there. But if you did get the ones that are labeled G&B, they do have the JST connector on there. And of course, you can always lop this off and put an XT30 on it if you choose to. I did add some strain relief right here. I would suggest you do that, because if you have any battery ejections, especially with this sort of zip tie, I can never get these as tight as I want. That's why I like the that's why I like the Airblade UAV battery straps, because they have a nice little buckle on them, so I can really crank those down and try to make sure my batteries don't eject. In the quick roll, I pointed to the fact that this has pins that connect the ESC to the flight controller, because that's important to note. Some people are adverse to that. I'm not. I use a lot of the HGLRC stacks, and they have pins. I haven't had problems with these pins breaking because of crashes, but it has been reported in various groups that some people have experienced where these pins get separated because of crash and the jolting between these two different boards. So take that into consideration as well. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please leave that in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.